There are certain people who don't just play heroes, they live like them. They don't need capes, explosions, or self-promotion. All they need is a pair of boots, a strong back, a quiet stare, and the kind of integrity that can't be faked. Clint Walker was one of those men, a living monument to the old American ideal: honor, strength, kindness, and humility, wrapped up in a 6'6" frame that felt carved from granite. Clint Walker entered the world as Norman Eugene Walker on May 30, 1927, in the industrial town of Hartford, Illinois. Life wasn't easy. Born into the Great Depression, Clint was raised by a working-class family that understood struggle. His father, Paul, worked in the oil fields, while his mother, Gladys, kept the household running with grace and grit. From a young age, Clint learned the value of hard work and quiet determination. He grew up fast, taking on jobs to help support his family. By the time he was a teenager, his physical stature already set him apart, but it was his calm, respectful demeanor that really left an impression. Neighbors remembered him not as the loud, showy type, but as the boy who listened more than he talked, helped without being asked, and never made a fuss. That quiet strength would become his lifelong trademark. Like many young men of his generation, Clint was called to service during World War II. He joined the Merchant Marine, serving on ships that carried supplies across dangerous waters. It wasn't glamorous, but it was dangerous and essential, and it shaped his view of the world. Clint saw the cost of war, the value of discipline, and the fragility of life. These weren't lessons he spoke about often, but they stayed with him, just beneath the surface. After the war, he drifted, trying to find his place in the world. He worked as a doorman, a hotel bouncer, a security guard at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. At one point, he even worked in a factory building sheet metal. He wasn't chasing fame. He didn't even think of acting. He was just trying to live a decent life. But fate had other plans. Clint Walker's journey to stardom wasn't something he had planned, but it seemed almost inevitable the moment he walked into the room. With a towering 6'6" frame, broad shoulders, and a jawline chiseled from granite, Clint had the kind of commanding presence that simply couldn't be ignored. His piercing steel blue eyes and quiet strength exuded an old-school masculinity that Hollywood was eager to capture. Talent scouts took notice almost immediately. They saw in Clint not just another handsome man, but a potential icon, someone who could redefine the Western hero for a new generation. In the early 1950s, he started with humble beginnings, uncredited parts, background roles, and blink-and-you-miss-it appearances. But Clint's aura couldn't be hidden for long. Behind the scenes, studio insiders began whispering about the soft-spoken man from Illinois who looked like he'd stepped right out of a frontier legend. He wasn't classically trained, but he didn't need to be. His authenticity was magnetic. In an era when studios often molded actors into manufactured stars, Clint didn't need polishing. He simply needed a chance. That chance came when Warner Bros., on the lookout for fresh talent to lead a new type of television series, took a gamble on the unknown actor. It was 1955, and television was entering a golden age. The public was hungry for bold stories, bigger heroes, and sweeping adventures. The network's new project, Cheyenne, aimed to deliver just that. Clint was cast as Cheyenne Bodie, a mysterious, morally upright drifter in the post-Civil War West. It was a gamble in many ways, not just for Clint but for television itself. Cheyenne wasn't just another Western. It was the first hour-long Western series ever produced for TV, and its success or failure would set a precedent. Would audiences stay engaged for a full hour? Could television support a sweeping cinematic narrative every week? The answer came swiftly. From the moment Clint Walker appeared on screen, wearing his iconic wide-brimmed hat, walking tall across dusty plains with a calm, deliberate stride, viewers were captivated. There was something elemental about him. He didn't have to say much. His presence did the talking. He brought to Cheyenne Bodie a quiet dignity, strength, and moral clarity that felt both timeless and timely. Men admired him. Women adored him. And children saw in him the kind of hero they wanted to grow up to be. Clint wasn't just playing a cowboy, he was the cowboy. His performance didn't feel like acting, It felt like truth. Whether he was facing down outlaws, protecting the innocent, or wrestling with questions of right and wrong, Clint infused each moment with sincerity and soul. Week after week, millions of viewers tuned in not just for the action and adventure, but to see the man who made integrity look heroic. Cheyenne became a phenomenon, and with it, Clint Walker became a household name. In a matter of months, he went from an anonymous extra to one of television's most recognizable and beloved stars. But more than that, he had revived the cowboy legend for a new medium, and in doing so, carved out a permanent place in Hollywood history. With every new episode of Cheyenne, Clint Walker brought to life more than just a cowboy. He gave America a symbol of decency, strength, and quiet moral courage. Week after week, Cheyenne Bodie rode into towns plagued by trouble, stepped into conflicts no one else dared to face, and stood up for those who had no voice. But unlike many Western heroes of the era, Cheyenne wasn't driven by revenge or self-interest. He didn't fight for glory. He helped because it was right. And when the dust settled, he often rode away alone, without a medal, a trophy, or even a thank you. He didn't need recognition. His reward was knowing he'd done the right thing. Clint understood the power of the character he portrayed. To millions, Cheyenne Bodie became the very embodiment of the American West at its noblest, principled, brave, and compassionate. But Clint didn't want his cowboy to be a caricature of invincibility. He knew that to resonate with people, Cheyenne had to be more than just a man with a gun and a horse. He had to be real. He had to be vulnerable. So Clint infused Cheyenne with humanity. He gave him moments of doubt, of sorrow, of weariness. There were times when Cheyenne grieved, times when he hesitated, and times when he questioned the world he wandered through. This emotional depth set Cheyenne apart. The show wasn't just about action or justice. It was about the personal toll of doing good in a complicated world. And Clint made sure of that. Off-screen, Clint was just as committed. He pushed back on scripts that glorified violence or painted conflict in black and white terms. He refused roles that called for cruelty without cause. He asked for, and sometimes demanded, rewrites when he felt the material lacked integrity. One of the causes closest to his heart was the portrayal of Native American characters. At a time when Westerns often relied on crude and harmful stereotypes, Clint was an early and outspoken advocate for more respectful and nuanced representation. He insisted that Native characters be treated with dignity and their cultures depicted with some measure of truth. He didn't win every battle, but he fought them quietly, firmly, and with unwavering conviction. Clint's care and compassion radiated beyond the screen. Fans noticed. They felt it. Letters poured in, from veterans who said Cheyenne helped them through hard times, from parents who trusted the show enough to watch it with their children, and from young boys and girls who wrote that Cheyenne Bodie was their hero. But more importantly, they often said Clint was their hero, too. There was no separation between the man and the character. He wasn't pretending to be noble, he was noble. And that authenticity resonated. In a time of shifting cultural values, when many families were searching for something or someone to believe in, Clint Walker gave them a character who stood for timeless truths: courage, kindness, humility, and justice. Cheyenne Bodie didn't seek out fame or fortune. He just did what was right. And through Clint's steadfast portrayal, audiences came to believe in the idea that goodness, even in a harsh and wild world, could still prevail. Clint Walker may have brought a quiet, stoic presence to the screen, but off-screen, he was no stranger to confrontation, especially when it came to matters of integrity. At the peak of Cheyenne's success, with the show pulling in millions of viewers and Clint himself becoming one of television's most beloved faces, a storm was brewing behind the scenes. Warner Bros. Had Clint under a tight studio contract, standard for the time, but with little flexibility or fair compensation. When he asked for better pay and more creative input, the studio dug in its heels. Many thought Clint would back down. After all, he was a relatively new star, and Cheyenne was the role that made him. But Clint Walker wasn't just another studio puppet. He valued fairness over fame. With unshakable resolve, he walked away from the show at the height of its popularity, knowing full well he might be sacrificing everything he had built. But Clint's gamble paid off. The studio tried to recast him. It didn't work. Audiences didn't want just a cowboy. They wanted Clint Walker. They wanted Cheyenne Bodie. Warner Bros. Eventually relented, and when Clint returned to the saddle, he came back with his dignity intact, and with terms that better reflected his worth. In doing so, he earned more than just a contract victory. He earned a rare reputation in Hollywood as a man who couldn't be bought, manipulated, or compromised. That strength of character followed him into his film career, where he chose roles not for the paycheck, but for the principle. In The Dirty Dozen, 1967, he held his own among a cast of heavyweights. In Night of the Grizzly, None But the Brave, and Gold of the Seven Saints, Clint continued to play characters that echoed his real-life values: quiet men of honor, dignity, and action. He could have chased fame in flashier roles, but instead, he stayed true to what mattered to him, telling stories that meant something. In 1971, Clint's real-life grit was tested in the most harrowing way imaginable. While skiing at Mammoth Mountain, a freak accident turned tragic. A ski pole impaled his chest, puncturing his heart. By the time he arrived at the hospital, doctors believed it was too late. They pronounced him dead. But Clint Walker defied the odds. Just as he had done on screen so many times before, he came back from the brink. Emergency open-heart surgery saved his life. The recovery was grueling, the pain unrelenting. But Clint, true to form, faced it all with quiet strength and resolve. Incredibly, within a few short months, he was back on his feet and back in front of the camera. Most people would have called it a miracle. Clint simply called it determination. To his fans, it only confirmed what they had long believed, that Clint Walker wasn't just playing a strong man, he was one. As time passed, Clint began to retreat from Hollywood's spotlight. He had nothing left to prove. Instead, he chose a quieter, more grounded existence, spending time in the natural landscapes he loved, enjoying the peace of the mountains, and relishing the company of his family. His daughter, Valerie, born in 1950, broke barriers in her own right by becoming one of the first female commercial airline pilots in America. Clint never boasted about her success, but his pride was unmistakable. It was the kind of pride that came not from vanity, but from knowing he had raised a strong, capable woman in a world that didn't always make room for strong, capable women. Though his personal life had its ups and downs, including 3 marriages, Clint remained, by all accounts, a deeply decent man. He wasn't perfect, but he was kind. Those who worked with him described him as respectful, generous, and refreshingly ego-free. He didn't throw tantrums, he didn't demand adoration. He was a gentleman, something increasingly rare in show business. In his later years, Clint lent his distinctive voice to animated films and appeared in documentaries and retrospectives about the golden age of westerns. Even then, when age had softened his frame and silvered his hair, he still felt like Cheyenne. That towering presence never faded. The sense of honor never wavered. Clint Walker passed away on May 21, 2018, just 9 days shy of his 91st birthday. The news was met with a quiet reverence, a respectful silence befitting a man who had built a legacy not on scandal or self-promotion, but on strength, dignity, and goodness. He didn't leave behind a trail of awards or tabloid headlines. He left something far more enduring, an example. In a time when masculinity often gets reduced to bravado, Clint reminded us that true strength is silent. A real man doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. That kindness isn't weakness, and that doing what's right, even when it's hard, is the truest form of courage. His memory endures not just in reruns of Cheyenne, but in the hearts of those who still believe in honor, in the values he stood for, in the quiet way he lived his life, never seeking attention, always earning respect. So here's to Clint Walker, the gentle warrior, the mountain of a man with a heart of gold, the cowboy who never sold out, never gave in, and never stopped believing in goodness. He may have ridden off into the sunset, but in the myths we tell, the shows we rewatch, and the ideals we hold on to when the world gets dark, he rides on. Forever.